Hey, it's Cruz with A. Let's get real. Content is rarely created in a content management system, but we act like it is. Who really is writing into a CMS? Very few people. But it's like we're in denial. We buy content products as though the content magically gets in there. Vendors perpetuate this myth and make it seem like all the content is going to live its entire life in a CMS, and it's going to publish everywhere, and it's going to come from everywhere, all in that one content repository. It's just not true. And it's probably not a surprise to anyone watching. It's a lot messier than the marketing. It's time to admit it. We need to face the reality that content lives a much bigger life. Content starts in many places, and it goes to many places. Think about some of them. Word is the #1 acquisition source in the enterprise. Markdown, XML editors, Google Docs, lots of authoring tools and formats, lots of content layout tools. We need to get comfortable with the fact that content assets may start their life in any one of many sources. That's why A advocates for decoupled authoring. But let's talk about what that is and why it's different from just a messy approach to acquiring or creating content. Let's think about the headless and content as a service movements. So CMS vendors have been willing to adopt the idea that we need to publish content out via API to many sources. So CMS providers no longer want to control 100% of the rendering of the content. Some of them in hybrid systems can manage rendering, but many of them, including headless systems that are native, can automatically create an endpoint machinable for all the content to be available to publishing environments and different website consumption environments and different downstream usages of that content. But that's not happening on the acquisition side. Decoupled authoring is an approach to content acquisition that assumes content creation happens separately from content management in multiple places, and that content can be structured to flow from multiple sources into a single unified form. So to adopt decoupled authoring, we need to fundamentally accept the idea that content can come from multiple places and move into another managed state. Content needs to flow from authoring to management to delivery. Decoupled content sources can be structured, semi-structured, or unstructured. Structured sources include XML authoring tools, content acquisition tools like Gather Content, or any other tool that accepts a fixed schema and offers authors fields to fill out or apply markup in their authoring process that indicate structure. Semi-structured sources are tools or markup approaches that can be made to imply structure. For example, the use of styles in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs, or the use of Markdown or other text decorations that authors are trained to use. And unstructured, of course, is what many organizations just do as a default. We throw some content into some form or another without regard to any structure at all. Decoupled authoring works with all three, structured, semi-structured, or unstructured. And we build a content intelligence system that's engineering a provider model from these sources into an integrated core content repository. That doesn't necessarily mean a single system. It means a core approach for content that shares the same structure. In order to make decoupled authoring really work, we need the content to follow the master content model, so it can match decoupled authoring sources to CMS destinations, and then out into a content as a service API. So, A lot of words, but let's cover some examples of decoupled authoring. At A, internally, we're building an approach for acquiring content for our own article content types. And we built it in two separate systems to start out with, Oxygen XML and EasyData. And then we pull that structured content into a managed content repository as raw XML, where it then gets transformed and inserted with its metadata into the CMS and also into PDF output forms. So it's decoupled authoring from multiple sources into a supply chain and back out into multiple channels. Right now, the web CMS and a PDF form. Here's another example. For a client, we're doing some similar decoupled XML acquisition into the Nginx CMS. So from the authoring tool, which can be used on the author's desktop or on the web form, and then we pull that into a CMS and the content API that comes out of that Nginx CMS. For another client, we're acquiring content in Word. We're using a structured XML output tool to get that content moved into a supply chain and then into Sitecore for publishing. In another example, architecture, we're using a decoupled approach for building Adobe Experience fragments and loading them into multiple AEM instances. So that helps to streamline the content flow when we're dealing with a complex, huge AEM ecosystem, many of which don't today share the same modular content repo. Decoupled authoring is just another part of a better, more streamlined content supply chain. Let's build a new way of working with this stuff of knowledge, our content, our intelligent content. We can do it. It takes some engineering, it takes some discipline, it takes some vision, it takes some education. But if we take steps, we will get to a new era of content intelligence, one step at a time towards a smarter world.